So we'll get into some of these questions. Question was, would you present a local law protecting Chautauqua County residents from state-mandated quarantine camps and ensure the Sheriff's Department, local police, and local Department of Health do not enforce the state law to forcefully quarantine? Do we need a local law? I don't believe we do, because I don't believe that would happen. I can't speak for the sheriff. I would not support moving people out of their homes because they have a communicable disease. But let's remember, does anybody know what the Job Corps facility was prior to the Job Corps?
Tuberculosis.
It was the tuberculosis hospital.
Yes.
Okay, so this isn't new. Okay, this concept of putting everybody in one area. It's not new, but again, do I support this? Not at all. I didn't support the governor's mask mandate the last time she came out. I got a lot of criticism from people. It is what it is. At that point, we learned so many mistakes from COVID, and again, you could go back and criticize, well, you did this. Yeah, I did, because, we didn't know any different. When this started, let's face it, I was very oppositional because for 3 weeks they were shutting people down. I'm like, I ain't got nothing. We'd have meetings with the state leaders across New York State. And if you ever get a chance, Google Steve Aquario. He's a great guy, one of my best friends. In this business. Steve would give these great motivational speeches. Now, something to really make you laugh, we would get on there with all the leaders across New York State, right? New York State, the great Empire State, Excelsior. People are watching Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, yelling at their kids, doing dishes. You think you would have put the phone on mute. Steve's trying to give this great motivational speech and, 20, words for 200, Alex. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? This guy's like really gearing up. Because it was challenging, when COVID first started. But to getting back to it, I'm not making light of it. I would not support any mandate. You would have to come down here and force us and tell us why we have to. Because where are we going to put everybody to begin with? That's the other side of it. There isn't any. Is it a scare tactic? Certainly is. I think it's a very huge scare tactic. Again, somebody called our office today, did you support, the senator? I supported the senator's lawsuit that he filed, yes. It was a great idea. He's in a different position, with the state than we are here in Chautauqua County. So, again, realistically, I think that was, I can't explain what it was. But again, I just don't feel that there's any teeth to that. And you would have to, tell us why that person is not able to stay in their home if they are ill, because we've been doing it all our lives.
Right.
Keep yourself.
The current leadership in our county is absolutely correct. I don't believe that it would happen with our current leadership. I think the issue is I don't think Australia thought that would ever happen. I don't think Canada thought that would ever happen, or New Zealand, or any of these other countries never thought they would pull people out of their homes, but they did. And so I think the whole point is you put in the words wherever, and you make it have some teeth to it, so that in the event that leadership changes, we still have a foundation to operate off of.
Certainly, and again, we could propose this. This is something the legislature has to pass, and I can't speak for the 19 men and women that do that. And if something I present, they would have to look at it. And again, it's something we haven't talked about. To be honest with you, am I fearful of that? Don't take it the wrong way. I think it was a governor's. It was kind of a last grasp at trying to have power. But again, I understand you guys have all spoken at the ledge meetings. There is some significance to this. But again, if we need to, it would be a sad day in Chautauqua County history that we have to write a law to keep people in their own homes. And that's something I'm committed to. Again, there are some people that love being quarantined, let me tell you. I hate to say it, but I think I got COVID again. I got to be out for 5 days, 10 days. I'll sit on my butt. You can pay me, and I think I got it again. We have had people that had like 3 and 4 episodes of, COVID time. Very frustrating as the county leader, very frustrating. Because there are some people that came to work. I'm not, you take it for what it's worth. I was at work all the time. On Sundays when we would go in to have our COVID team meetings, I would go into my office. Why? I could just get away, and I wasn't watching television or watching the Bills game or something along those lines. I was focused on my job. And again, so that, and just take that with a grain of salt. PJ, would I be willing to speak out against Governor Hochul's appeal to the quarantine? Oh, yes, I would. I have no, do we stop the appeal? I don't see why, at this point, the question I would have as a governor is, why do we need to put this in here? You know it's with meeting with opposition. We don't have a situation right now that would warrant it. So maybe if it ever happens again, no, that makes no sense. We will deal with this the same way we dealt with COVID, as it comes. You can't make laws now that we will enforce this because they can create their own whatever. I mean, what are we going to stop? I mean, realistically, COVID is an exacerbation or a larger potent common cold, right? Mm-hmm. So think about that. I guess I say I was guilty of when we closed down the county. I won't deny that. There were things we did that we felt were in the best interest of our residents. But the most interesting part about this was, you know how long we were in the shutdown?
Yes, too long.
8 weeks. You know how long we were in that purgatory state of we're not open, but we're just floundering? About 1.5 years. Yeah. The actual shutdown was 8 weeks. And in essence, we still were able to get vital services, but it was only 8 weeks. But this blah of the next 1.5 years of not knowing was interesting. Taking that back, Chautauqua County, one school remained open in session, full-fledged, and that was Chautauqua Lake. If I'm not mistaken, I also think Chautauqua Lake had some of the best test results in the last year. Because, and again, Josh Schildell, I've known Josh, again, I spent 25 years in that profession. I've known Josh as a personal friend for a long time. I think that was the right thing to do. I'm very confident we could have had those kids back to school. We just got too worried. In fact, you know what, it was kind of funny, and I'll share this with you. I was in a meeting with superintendents after it's kind of this haze of when COVID was happening. It was after the governor's that second mandate that Governor Hochul came up with, mandating masks again. And the superintendent said, we need you to issue a mask mandate. I said, no, we need you to do a mask mandate. Not doing it. You guys make a decision. Because at the end of the day, if it goes good or bad, you're going to blame me for it. No, you make the decision. Superintendents make a lot of money. Many, again, a lot of friends of mine. But I had somebody tell me, goes, I don't think you realize the difficult decisions we have to make. Wow. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to make a tough decision. I got a $300 million budget and 1,300 employees. You have a $20 million budget, less than 100 employees, but your life is a lot harder. It's just a magnitude. It's how you deal with things. I don't puff myself up. I don't say I'm better. It's just, it was a unique time, and it really lended to my skill set. I've been in the volunteer fire service now 33 going on 34 years, something I'm committed to, rose through the ranks, from line office to assistant chief. But, as my old wrestling coach said, that and $2.48 gets you an extra large double-double at Tim Hortons. But, it took that skill set of understanding, knowing, my doctors. I worked in the summers at the emergency room down at WCA, so I knew enough about medicine. My mom will tell you this. I should have been a doctor, but I wasn't. I was lazy. But I knew enough that you focus on the physicians. And I will tell you this. We made some great decisions. There were never votes. There was never a vote in our committee to do something. We listened to the information and made some of the decisions rationally that was in the best interest of our county. And a lot of times, people ask me, would you change anything you did? Looking back, I would not change. I'll stand by my decision because we made the decision based on the information we had at that time. Right. If I were to go back now, knowing now, back then, no. Let's ride it out. It's unfortunate. We did lose a lot of lives here in Chautauqua County. I knew several friends, my age, I'm 52, and younger, that died as a result of COVID. That is tragic. I will not dispute that. But again, we can't shop and shut down our entire world the way we did, back then. Moving on, do you acknowledge there are those trying to create one world government using the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the United Nations, and how can we stop it? Do I believe that? You know what? I don't really know. Do I believe that's happening? No. There are people that'll tell you they're trying to do it, and you could connect the dots based on some of the information that's out there. But I could tell you this. I've got a brother. He's my Irish twin. He's 51 years old, a year younger than I am. And he travels throughout the world. And I mean, when he travels, he comes up a red flag on the travel list because he's been to the Middle East so many times. He's going to Egypt, I think either this weekend or early next week, to learn about different cultural I think he's going to go learn about the pre-dynastic matriarchal society. That's a big word. But he's a phys ed teacher, he's like me. But he just got into fascination about the world. He's created the cultural competency components for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools from being all over the world. Do I think that the world can work together to form something like this? It's not likely because we can't get our thoughts together. Is it scary that there's potential when you look at some of the implemented procedures? Yeah, it is scary. But I do not believe it's never happened, and I don't think any one of us are going to see it in our lifetimes, for the entire world to agree and get something going. Is it scary that Russia and China are linking up? Certainly it is, without a doubt. Let me just share this with you, and not to go off too much. But there was a book, and I ask everybody, if you're really interested, read it. It's called Red Notice. Significant link to Chautauqua County. Because Bill Browder, that wrote the I forget the name, wrote the book. This man single-handedly crippled the Soviet economy. He crippled their economy. Because when the Soviet Union collapsed, they didn't know what to do with the money, right? So you had, everybody got 5,000 shares. So I got 5,000 shares of a fishing fleet. You got 5,000. You got 5. So at the end of the day, you got 5. What are you going to do with that 5,000 shares? I'm going to give you $100. Take it. He bought a fishing fleet. Bill Brower bought a fishing fleet in the Soviet Union for $200,000 with an estimated value over $20 million. Oh, he did this time and time again. Red Notice is Interpol's most wanted list. Vladimir Putin put him on the most wanted list because he crippled their economy. He beat the snot out of them at their own game because he knew economy, he knew finance, and so forth. So, what you hear is, Putin's trying to come back, and you have to. What is scary about Putin is this. They talk about his wealth. He's very clever in what he's doing. So the oligarchs are the mob bosses over there. So let's say this is one giant meeting of all the oligarchs in Russia. You're just right here in front of me. I'm going to take you to prison. You're going to prison. The rest of y'all want to stay out? Pay me. That's how he's playing the game. That's how he's amassed his wealth. Not because he's that smart with investing. No, he's a large crime boss. So again, very concerned. I'll say this now, not asking for sympathy, not saying anything. I do have family. I'm Ukrainian. My mom's side of the family. We still have family over in Lviv. For them, they could come here anytime they want. They know it. They have homes here in the U.S. For them, it's like riding out a hurricane. We're going to go to Poland. We'll live there, and when it gets better, we'll go back. My family's been there for hundreds of years. But it's scary. It is scary. So into that context, do I feel the whole world can unite in one? I don't ever think it will happen. But it is scary the way they can use the World Health Organization. I would pray to God the United Nations doesn't become that. The United Nations was formed to have that governing policy and keeping other countries at bay.
They aren't doing too well at it.
I don't disagree. Given the failure of so many businesses and the loss of 13,000 local jobs over the past decade, and the poor choices proposed businesses such as wind and solar, would you consider naming new leadership in the Chautauqua County Development Agency? Here's my response to that. If you look at poor choices because we've looked at wind and solar, you also have to look at the fact they were instrumental in bringing several businesses here to Chautauqua County. So we have to balance that out. I think Mark Geis, whether you like it or not, and I'll say this, I think he's doing a phenomenal job of bringing new businesses here and retaining business and jobs, bringing new jobs and businesses and retaining jobs that are already here. We've been told in certain instances they would have outsourced these jobs to China, Mexico, or India, and you'll all be SOL. So we are working. Now, the fact that there's a lot of criticism about wind and solar. When they're looking at wind and solar, the piece that is dictating New York State is home rule. You'll read in the paper today that there was this proposal of a wind farm or solar project was already in the works. Okay, so it wasn't something new. They have taken a pause on wind and solar. This has already been in the works, but the village of Sherman and the town of Sherman both petitioned, did all the work. This was their property. That's what they wanted. Okay, so the county does not have the authority to come in and tell them, no, you can't do that. Now, my biggest fear, and I will tell you this now, looking each one of you. Yeah, my biggest fear is in 20 or 40 years, way to go, Wendell, look at all these damn solar panels, nice job. That is my biggest fear. And what is a bigger fear is if these guys are willing to give this much to the landowner, what are they making? We have had several opportunities to put solar projects on county properties, and we have turned it down. Because again, if you're giving me $175,000 a year, what are you making? No businessman in their right mind would give you 20 or 30% of your profit. So let's say there's 10%. You're making 1.7, I'm getting 175. I can't, again, just off the top of my head, that hasn't been out there, but that's what we were offered. We could do a solar project at the landfill. Good. We're not doing it. Unless there's some overwhelming and compelling reason we need to. We haven't supported it. So would I consider naming new leadership? If I name new leadership in the county IDA, I would have to look based on the merit of, blunders in, business. We aren't there. Do we make mistakes? Yes, we do. There have been businesses that the IDA has invested in, not solely Mark Geis. Over the last decade, Mark has been there for about 4, maybe 5 years. Prior to that, there were a lot of mistakes made from the IDA. We're trying to rectify that. We have some projects that are going, and like I said, here's a big thing I could tell everybody, and it's a very hard thing. We are working on a lot of different projects. I am not a politician. I had one of the legislators say to me, through another friend, he goes, county executive needs to be more political. That ain't me. I'm not a politician. Politics are the games and the backdoor deals that are happening. That's not what I'm about. I'm a pretty straight up, straightforward person. People have a question. Some woman came today. I've got a question. Come on into the office right now. Walked over. She voiced her concern. We talked about it. I had 2 other gentlemen talking about Chautauqua Lake, what we're doing, and so on. I said, come on in. Talk right now. I don't deny anybody the opportunity to sit down looking face to face. Because even in Zoom, you could be playing with your phone and doing all sorts of things. And are you or not? I gauge what's happening by people's body language, their body English, how they're sitting, squirming in a chair. If you say something, their face gets red and they start to fidget, you're really struck a nerve. So I keep that in mind. But I feel, could Mark do better in certain instances? We all make mistakes. But again, he knows my position on wind and solar, and the other side of this is it's home rule. That's the one thing that we talked about earlier with the governor. These towns and villages have that opportunity. And it's a challenge, but I understand where everybody's coming from. I do not believe that wind and solar are going to, bridge the gap in our energy needs, no. And I want to make sure that we don't end up with a massive problem down the road. Because if you look, what people show a lot of times, they're out in Puerto Rico and different places where these solar farms were destroyed by a hurricane and just left there to rot and decay, etc. The big thing that really frustrates me, and I drive through it, it's really an embarrassment. Governor Cuomo's illustrious windmill project at the New York State Thruway stops. Great idea, right? I don't think I've ever seen one of them work, and now they're starting to dismantle all of them. There is one that works in Westfield. That's a 3-prop, and it goes a little bit faster. That might be, but that tube looks like a big old blade off an Osprey, a military. Westfield has one. But that one goes. That's maybe because it's only got 3 propellers, and it might be a better. But think about that. So we're wondering. I've said this before. Man, if we have windmills, what if we put 10,000 windmills offshore in the Gulf of Mexico? We can absorb all that energy. Right now, they freeze out after 20 miles an hour. If I got 75-mile-an-hour winds, why don't I build a wind turbine that can capture 75-mile-an-hour winds? That's a hell of a lot of power, right? But they didn't design that. Those windmills at first. They thought I thought them as somewhat majestic. When you looked at them, they stood there. But now when they're starting to litter the landscape, and Europe is already saying, we're done. We're going back to our old means. I think we need to look at what's happened in Europe and start to take notice with that. What Democrats are running against Republicans in the next election? Tell us about Kurt Gustafson and Lisa Vanstrom. I can tell you Lisa is a very staunch Republican. Has been a close ally of mine since I've been in the legislature. I got in, I've been here 11 years, so about 3 years, so I forget the numbers, I forget what the math, like 2011 or 13. Lisa came in the following cycle, the next 2-year cycle. She's been there afterwards. Brings a wealth of knowledge with Kathy Young's office and coming in. Kurt Gustafson is a former county employee. He worked in the legal office, then he worked with BOCES, and he's involved in their labor relations. I've known Kurt. I think he was a senior when I was a freshman. Lisa's your solid choice there. So, I mean, I support at least 100%. Kurt's very new. The next one is Fred Larson, Elizabeth Rankin. Dear God. If you want to hear about how good somebody was, pick up the Post-Journal and read Fred Larson's columns. The sad part about it is, like most of the Democrats running or current legislators, they fail to pick up the phone and ask questions. They're all about gathering, getting the limelight, getting the head story, getting on the front page of the paper. But they don't pick up the phone and ask. The county executive has 7 positions in his office. Come into my office, you ain't going to find 7 people. I'll tell you that right now. There's 3 of us, myself and 2 staffers. I had 1 person that moved across. 1 person is the IDA, Mark Geis. His salary is in the county executive's office but doesn't work there. The next one is our compliance officer. And we actually, this is what I love, they voted down a position I wanted to put in for media information officer, even though they already passed it in the budget. And the same woman who voted it down overwhelmingly supported the candidate that we had. Oh, this guy's awesome. Really? We should hire him. You voted down the job, just so you're aware, right? You didn't want this guy here. So it's unique. But getting back to this, the reason I say that about Fred Larson is Fred talked about a lot of things. He'll pat himself on the back thinking that Southern Tier Brewing Company came here because we had a spec building built in the town of Busti. Not even close. I encourage everybody to buy Southern Tier beer. There was a time when Skip Yon told everybody if you drink a beer a day, it's the same as drinking a glass of wine a day. It's good for your heart. We said, really? He goes, no. My son-in-law took out a loan for me, and I want you to pay it back a little bit faster. I can't say enough about Finn DeMink and what he's done with Southern Tier Brewing Company, but that had nothing to do with Fred Larson being in the legislature in the 1990s and putting that spec building up. Nothing at all. The issue, they want to bring essential air service back to the Jamestown area. You should do that. We're already doing it. The only problem is we've hired an amazing woman, Shannon Barnhart, actually has a degree and a master's degree in airport management. Nothing we've had in the past. We've had some great facilities managers, but never an airport manager. A woman that can go and say, this is what you need. So what she's doing now is if we want essential air service, this is what you need, a market analysis. I asked for it. They took it out of the budget. I put it back in. They took it out again. We put it in ARPA. They took it back out again. I put it back in. Now it's back in with partial funding from the IDA, partial funding from ARPA. We need that market analysis because the FAA and the federal government said, we're not even going to look at considering essential air service unless you have that study. So thank you, Fred. I wish you would have picked up the phone and asked the question because we've been working on this for over a year. And if you didn't know, he graduated from Princeton and Yale Law School because read that at the bottom. He'll tell you every time. Fred Larson he wants to go back to the 1990s and back to the glory days, and because he's an attorney and he was a former judge, he knows it all. No. Elizabeth Rankin is a very hardworking, dedicated Republican. Fred will probably go after her for a lot of things, but there isn't anybody more committed and more dedicated to keeping taxes low and fighting for her constituents. I want to see us keep that seat because I want people to see that there is a strong Republican presence in Chautauqua County. Let me give you some numbers. 4 years ago, when Nick Langworthy took over as chairman of the New York State the Republican Committee, slap me for saying that, there was a 2,500 person margin in favor of the Democrats. Since then, under Chairwoman Nicole Ellis and everyone else, many of you here probably, we now have a 4,500 person lead. 6,000 people. They had a 2,500 person lead. We now lead them by 4,500 more Republicans in Chautauqua County than Democrats. That says a lot. People are opening their eyes to what is happening. Good. The sad part, out of 62 counties in New York State, Governor Hochul won 13 and still maintained the governor's office. That's sad. That's very sad. Yeah.
One question about the airport. Isn't one of the biggest issues with the runway length?
The length of the runway, well, yes and no. For some of the bigger private jets, it's an issue in the winter because if they touch down and have to take off again, a good pilot will tell you it doesn't matter. Questionable pilots, or if there's a corporate policy like Cummins Engine, they will not land in the winter, but they will land in the summer. Now, in order to extend that runway, that was something that they did back in the 50s or earlier, so we really can't, it's not a fault of anyone's. But to extend that runway, the length it would be needed would be about $17 to $20 million. And the question people have with that is it warranted? We don't know because, again, you remember there's those federal grants that we have that obligate us to keep the airport open. So that's a question people raise. If we invest in that money, if we stay committed to the federal government and something goes south, will we be able to sell, or, what is our obligation to the federal government? I can tell you, people have no idea the amount of jet traffic that comes in and out of that airport. It's unbelievable. We have the owner of Madison Square Garden that flies in and out. Cummins flies in and out regularly. There's at least 1 or 2 baseball players that live in Bemis Point from the major leagues. They fly in and out of there. Multiple people that live in Chautauqua Institution fly in and out of there. Their jets. Jay Leno flew in, I think, last weekend or the weekend before. I did get to meet Terry Bradshaw. He flew in. Really cool guy. We have a lot going on at that airport. So people, the airport's only for the rich and wealthy. There's a lot of, blue-collar people that have planes that come in, but there's a lot of people that come in what they call for the $100 hamburger. We don't have that now because the restaurant's closed, but the goal, and I trust Shannon and her efforts, one, to bring the essential air service back, but if not, if the study says that's not it, she has plans to pivot and create a general aviation airport. Here's why. In Akron, New York, they have a 62 hangar facility. All 62 hangars are filled with general aviation small aircraft. Mm-hmm. We are looking to pivot in that direction. If that's the case and we find out that the air service is not sustainable here, then pivot and start to open up for those smaller aircraft and allowing them to use the Jamestown airport. Again, I'm excited about the growth for the airport. But to answer your question, the runway is long enough. Good pilots will tell you it doesn't matter, we can do it. But I know Cummins has a corporate policy because of the length. They won't land there in the wintertime, which the runway's bare anyway. I don't know. I don't get it. Our crews are great. They wouldn't be coming in jets. You would probably have a turboprop. We ran those Saab 6000s or 9000, I forget what it was, when it was Chautauqua Airlines. So you could get that in and out. Honestly, you think I'm crazy? I really feel there's a future in electric aviation. We have one of the first charging stations for Beta Technologies to have an electric aircraft. People say, I don't know. Guess what? 100 and some years ago, we didn't think we could fly either. So again, I don't want to get going, but we can go on and on. But I support Lisa Vanstrom. I support Elizabeth Rankin 100%. How can you help? Get out there, talk to your friends. If Elizabeth and Lisa start to have any political events, get out there and support them. We have a couple of bigger concerns to the city of Jamestown. Kim Eklund is a candidate for mayor against Eddie Sundquist. I can't say enough about that. If you live in the city of Jamestown, support Kim Eklund. Okay, I have been working with the leadership in both cities, and Kim is the right choice for mayor of the city of Jamestown. Can the county executive recommend a resolution calling for the protection of environment requiring utility-scale solar projects to prove there are no toxic PFAS in their solar components? The solar special use permit for the town of Chautauqua has that requirement. Require that no payment in lieu of pilots be used by the county for solar and require that all components be recycled. We'd have to look at that. Again, that's something that, could the county executive recommend that? Yes. But that resolution also has to be passed by the legislature. So that's something, we'd have to look at all that. PFAS, I don't know if you're paying attention. I'm up to here in PFAS problems because, a couple years ago, 2 years ago, there was a detection of PFAS. Now I love state of New York, right? They've been monitoring the water wells in Mayville for years. And during COVID, they changed the parameters. So instead of parts per million, it went to parts per trillion. And there was PFAS detected. Now what they're saying is the county ran a New York State sponsored training with New York State equipment, including firefighting foam. And now the county contaminated. Wait a minute. I'm still not a firm believer that the county was the sole contaminator. But PFAS and PFNA, there's a lot of different words. These are things that definitely I would consider, bringing up to the county and having them again, for what it's worth, I know some of you talk about Niagara County's project. I'm very good friends with Becky Whittish, the chairwoman of the Niagara County Legislature. And as soon as I found out they had their moratorium, I reached out, I got a copy to the legislature. It's there. I'm not blaming the legislature that they haven't acted on it, but we did get that document from Niagara County, and we're going. Again, the tough part about this is anywhere we go in New York State, businesses won't come here if you don't offer those pilot programs. Rarely will you find large businesses of industry or anything coming here. So having said that, I understand everybody's concerns, and we're looking at that as we go ahead. But I'm telling you now, the thing that does keep me awake is, will we end up being that? I don't want that on my watch. Again, there's a lot of debates back and forth. I don't feel solar and wind are going to support our energy needs, and I don't want to be the guy that approves all those. So our IDA knows that, and so does the legislature. Well, PJ put something in the paper stating against this quarantine regulation. I'm against it. If I put it in the paper, I guarantee it's not going to show up. I can tell you that. They're not my biggest fan. Or I'm not their biggest either way. I don't know how you look at it. I've put things in the paper that did. Last year, I put in 3 of the top 250 people in business first were women. That's what I put, 3. The highest in Chautauqua County, all 3 were women. Did it run? No. Because you were a power politician. I don't give a rat's backside. It wasn't about me. I had nothing about me. I don't care what number I am. I don't do this to see what number I rank in Buffalo Business First. Anna Dibble, Lisa Haglund, and I forget the third woman. Phenomenal. They outranked Greg Edwards, who's a well-established leader in government in Western New York. Actually, in business in Western New York with the Gebby Foundation. The 3 women outranked him. Great. Anna Dibble, I was told, was promoted to a corporate office. Now, why I say that? Because Anna started at Cummins Engine as an engineer and worked her way through that plant to become the manager. You walk through and take a tour of Cummins Engine with Anna Dibble, she can tell you about every line, what they do, how they do it, and she's actually rolled up her sleeves and worked. So I don't mean to get off the topic, but there's so many things happening in Chautauqua County degree. And so again, would I say something in the paper? I am against that quarantine regulation. I'm against us taking people out. Again, the sheriff and I would have a serious go-around with that. Can our county join the lawsuit? And if not, what law or rule prevents us from doing so? I'd have to look into that. I don't know, because there are certain statutes and limitations the county has as far as what we can sue the governor on. And I don't know. Uniquely, part of me wants to think we are not able to sue the governor or New York State government, but don't quote me on that. But counties have a different, and it could part and parcel be because we are a charter form of government. What is the county executive and county legislators doing to help fight the quarantine lawsuit against quarantine clip? I support George's position by that. They rule against Hochul. Again, I would support that. I'd support George's efforts. I would stop the appeal. It's like, listen, they've already spoke. Here's the hard part about it is you get one judge in Western New York that says one thing. She'll find a judge in New York City that she appointed to say another thing. It makes no sense. Tell me why I have to remove you from your home because you're tested positive for a contagious disease. Stay in your house, right? You don't have to go to a special camp. We'll put everybody together that's sick. That's it. I apologize. I know I took a long time. I apologize.
A couple more questions, and somebody else has some. Feel free to hand them up here. Here's one. Will you be fighting for the allowance of churches to have armed safety teams?
I wouldn't have a problem with that. Okay, here's why. Right now, yes, it is very scary. And unfortunately, since I got my pistol permit, I carry my pistol more times than I ever thought I would. When I went to events with the county executives, now again, these are guys on both sides of the aisle. Some of my best friends, one of my best friends is a county executive from Albany. He's a diehard Democrat. He's the vice chairman of the state Democratic Party, but one of the most straightforward guys you'd ever want to meet. And when we get together as county executives, rarely do we talk politics. My friend of the North, different story. He's off on his own. Mark Poloncarz is very much political, very much whatever. Yeah. But the rest of us, So anyway, many of them carry guns when they're with them. If they don't, they have staff that do. I don't. And that's scary. But would I support that in churches? Yes, I support. Now, do you have to stand there with an assault rifle at the front and arm? No. But if somebody does happen to have a weapon, or they're armed in the church, it's sad because, right, Mel, these are where we're going to be attacked. Yeah. That's the scary part.
Got another question here. What drawback provisions does the IDA have when an organization does not fulfill its commitments, such as, I think, Cockaigne Ski Area, Athena, Cheese Factory at Fairbanks Farms?
Cheese Factory at Fairbanks Farms is still moving ahead. Okay, it's a slow process. We just talked about it today. Victoria Cheese, they are moving at a snail's pace, but they are moving. The hard part about this, and we'll talk about Athena because that's a kind of a bane of my existence. But anyway, these processes take way too long for me. I am too anxious. I can't deal with that. The cheese factory in Blockville, the old Fairbanks Farms, is still moving ahead. It's Victoria. They just they started brokering some of the deals with local dairy co-ops. In Italy, they get this guy right from area. He goes right to the farmer, gets the milk from him. But here we have to go through the co-ops. They purchased new equipment. They had to because the former place wasn't ready. The clawback, I'd have to find the legal component of that. I don't think they just write off that as a loss, but I will double check for you on that. I don't know the answer to that. But I can tell you the new system is going forward, the Victoria Cheese. Phoenix is a bane. Because Governor Cuomo came in here and said, look at what I did, $4 billion. Mayor Willie Rosas brought this to... That's in the town of Dunkirk, not the city. And unfortunately, how many years later, we still don't see the number of people there. That's a flaw, and the state has to get their act together and start pushing this. The other side, I'm told in these medical research companies, you dump a lot of money into research and there's setbacks, etc. Once that drug hits, look out, the sky's the limit, and you could be rolling in dough pretty fast. It is a concern. I have a great concern that Athenex is a massive building with $4 billion worth of investment that still lies there dormant. There's some litigation now. The new owner, I feel confident, although I question it every day, but I'd have to find out how much the IDA has involved with that in those pilot programs and et cetera.
Last question here. What have you heard about a roundabout in Gary?
What?
They talk about it all the time. Again, here's what, and this is, I'll bear with me on this, right? Because don't think I'm crazy, okay? Should he put a roundabout in Gary? I don't know if it's going to help, because do we have massive accidents in Gary at that intersection?
No.
I don't believe we do. I don't think Gary Fire, we don't have this. It's a pretty, yeah, exactly. So you would know. I was indoctrinated to roundabouts when I went to Scotland to compete. And you drive on the wrong side of the car on the wrong side of the road. And the roundabouts are a challenge, because you'd be driving down the road and it said, at the roundabout, take the second exit. I'm like, 1, 2, 3, go. And I'd be like, okay, you start. It goes, at the next roundabout, make a U-turn. Ah, damn it, I missed it. Roundabouts are challenging because they're not normal to us. That's right. In Europe, really, they're a pretty slick way to do it. Because if you think, now, what gets it like in Silver Creek, they have like 6 different, that screws you up. But if you're going like, let's say Hunt Road, you have a roundabout, you don't have to have it. If you want to go straight, you go 1, 2, and you go straight ahead. Really in the one in Fredonia is pretty good. You don't make a right-hand turn, you go straight. The one in Silver Creek, that's a tough one because you got, you can go one way, back on 5, over to 5, up to. So that one is challenging. But realistically, have I heard that? That's a talk about it. I don't believe that would be feasible in the town of Gary. Honestly, you know what? In downtown Jamestown, I get frustrated sitting at that light right there by CVS and Tim Hortons. There's a lot of space there. Could that be a roundabout? It's a 4-way intersection. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know if it'd be worth it. But again, it's just something to think about. But here in the U.S., think about this. It's about responsibility. And I will say this about the United States. Love it. I'm a very proud American. I love wearing USA on my clothing when I go somewhere to compete. But we have a hard time dealing, 1, with change, and the 2 is responsibility. Why don't we have a drinking age of 16 or lower or 18 here in the United States? Because we can't do it responsibly. You go to Europe. My daughter was an exchange student. She goes, Dad, the hardest part coming back to college I can't drink in the U.S. In high school, I could drink when I was in the Czech Republic or when I was in a different country. But I say that because we have a hard time understanding and accepting the responsibility. We blame everybody else when we make mistakes. Yeah. Roundabouts are very simple things, but just for us, we're used to red light, green light, and it's a challenge sometimes. Realistically, roundabouts you don't have to wait for a light. It moves a lot faster. But that's my personal opinion. I wouldn't say put them in at every intersection, but they do have a very effective use when you're looking at stoplights and so on and so forth. You really can't get into a head-on accident in a roundabout. You've got to go in a circle. You could get into an accident. Yeah, but, and again, if you're an American driving in Scotland, you might get into one because you're on the wrong side of the road. But again, it's just daunting. Anything else? And I apologize, one of the things I get accused of is talking too much, but spending 7 of my 20-some years as an elementary, kindergarten, first and second phys ed teacher, I explain things so people leave with very little question. So please, listen to what I've said. I stand by a lot of these things, but every day is something new. Every day is a new challenge. My commitment is, to again, creating a place and a residence in Chautauqua County where our taxes are low, where we have good communities, where we have a healthy investment in our economy, and getting our workforce back on track. But that's what I'm committed to. We have a lot of great projects, and I just tell everybody, bear with me. There's a lot of great things going on with Chautauqua Lake. Just have, I don't say have faith in me, but again, I know this is my job. This is how I provide for my family. So I want to make every effort I can to make this a place where my kids can come back and live, your kids can come back and live, or your kids can stay and live. I do take this very responsibly. I'm not going to give you some stump speech. I don't make promises because I never promise anybody anything, not even my wife. Okay, because I can't account for that. But I can tell you, I will do my damnedest to do what we can. We may not agree on things. We may not. And it is what it is. I'll be honest with you. We may have some, but I'm not going to have any animosity. We just would, agree to disagree. I do that, quite often, especially with our lake and herbicides. That's a challenge. Anyway, moving on. So I appreciate everybody's time. I did take a lot of time tonight.
Thank you.
Anything else? No, thank you. Thanks, everybody. There is no correlation. I talked to the sheriff and he...